How did the legendary Welt end up in Honkai's star rail? If you think he crossed the universe on a heroic mission to save Himeko, you have been lied to. The real story involves blackmail, a full-scale alien invasion, and a rogue AI. Forget the fan theories. The true culprits are Void Archives and the Sky People. But first, who is the man behind the glasses? Welt Yang is the legendary protector of Earth, though he was originally born with the name Joachim. He inherited the title Welt from his predecessor, the first Herrscher of Reason, Welt Joyce. When Joyce fell in battle against Otto Apocalypse, he entrusted his Herrscher core and his dream of saving humanity to the young Joachim. Mastering that core, Joachim rose to become the second Herrscher of Reason. His ability is formidable. Provided he completely understands an object's structure, he can construct a perfect replica instantly using Honkai energy. For years, he led the organization Anti-Entropy to fight the Honkai and check the power of Schicksal. He is a wise, battle-hardened veteran who has survived countless losses. Yet he remains ever willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. While he may not possess the sheer, raw power of other entities, his tactical genius is unmatched, allowing him to outmaneuver and crush enemies far surpassing his own strength. His weapon of choice is the 9th divine key, the Star of Eden. Forged from a Herrscher core, this artifact allows him to bend gravity to his will, capable of generating quasi-black holes at full power. The weapon has undergone several transformations throughout history, evolving from a heavy cannon to a compact sphere. These days, it takes the form of the stylish cane he carries in Star Rail. Following humanity's victory over the Honkai, Welt finally stepped back into a well-deserved retirement. He took a job at an animation studio, transitioning into a quiet life as an animator while mentoring his successor, Bronya Zajcik. It seemed that peace was finally here to stay, until a new crisis shattered the calm. The Sky People. A post-Honkai Odyssey story arc is set in the year 2026, a mere 8 years after humanity's hard-won victory over the Honkai. While Earth is slowly rebuilding from the ashes of war, peace turns out to be short-lived. A new threat arrives from the stars, the Sky People. These intergalactic marauders travel across the universe, hunting down vulnerable civilizations to drain their accumulated Honkai energy, leaving scorched wastelands in their wake. For a time, a theory circulated that the Sky People were a powerful civilization that had successfully defeated the Honkai on their home world. But this is nothing more than a myth. In reality, they are not conquerors, but runaway slaves. They are a mechanical race that eventually saw their leader break free from the system that enslaved them. Their origins actually trace back to Venus. Long before it came for Earth, the cosmic superentity known as the Cocoon of Finality visited our planetary neighbor. The cocoon arrived in solar system seeking an embrace, a total fusion of consciousness and essence with human life. On every planet it visits, it subjugates the flow of Honkai to achieve this goal. Earth was simply the next stage. Before us, the civilization of Venus was subjected to this same attempt. To resist the cocoon, Venusian civilization tapped into the power of the Sea of Quanta. However, their leading scientist, Lida, pushed the experiment too far. She triggered a quantum tsunami, a massive surge of energy that wiped all life from Venus in minutes. The resulting devastation was so absolute that it disrupted the cocoon's ability to reset the planet's development. Forced to abandon the dead world, The entity moved on to its next target, a young, lifeless Earth. Vita, however, survived the cataclysm. The raw energy of the quanta halted her aging and granted her godlike abilities. Obsessed with the idea of reviving Venus, she evolved into a post-human entity calling herself Sa. She began devouring bubble worlds in an endless harvest, utilizing an army of proxies and mechanical cleaners to execute her will. Among these servants, one figure stands out: Mara. Once a Venusian scientist herself, Mara was trapped in a mechanical body and enslaved by Sa. But she refused to accept her chains. Mastering the art of energy absorption, she staged a violent breakout, stealing a fleet of cleaners in the process. She escaped into the cosmos as a space pirate, founding the faction we now know as the Sky People. Thus, the Sky People are not an ancient civilization that mastered the Honkai. They are an artificial, mechanical race created by Sa. When Mara rebelled, she filled the power vacuum and seized control. Their defining trait is the ability to consume Honkai energy to rapidly mass-produce themselves. Furthermore, they can freely traverse the boundaries between worlds, using teleporters known as stargates. Their invasion protocol is methodical. First, they launch a scout disguised as a natural asteroid to gather data and assess the threat level. If the target is deemed viable, the stargate opens, the fleet pours in, and the world is consumed. But there is a catch. They are opportunistic cowards. They are terrified of advanced civilizations that possess the power to wipe them out. As a result, they only pick fights they know they can win, targeting weaker worlds for a guaranteed victory, then carefully scrubbing the crime scene clean. So, how and why did these aliens reach Earth? The catalyst was the first divine key, Void Archives. Void Archives. At the center of the Sky People's invasion lies the sentient divine key known as Void Archives. Formerly bound to Otto Apocalypse, this intelligence broke free following its master's death, commandeering one of the Overseer's spare bodies to pursue its own agenda. As an AI, Void Archives is bound by a single, overriding directive to ensure humanity's complete and absolute victory over the Honkai. The Archive, however, deemed Earth's current measures insufficient, leading it to devise a far more radical strategy. By the end of Part 1, Kiana Kozlana had ascended as the Herrscher of Finality and achieved an embrace with the Cocoon, gaining control over the planet's Honkai. Yet, neither she nor the Cocoon could fully subjugate the Force. To spare Earth, Kiana sealed the energy on the Moon. But this meant the Honkai hadn't truly vanished. It was merely contained. To solve this, Void Archives devised a drastic solution. He would summon the Sky People to Earth. The logic was cold but simple. If these aliens consumed the Honkai, the threat to humanity would finally be erased. The city of St. Fountain was chosen as the staging ground, serving as the specific anchor point where the Stargate would open to admit the Sky People. The calculated cost of this operation was the isolation of a single city and the surrender of the Honkai energy itself. At least, that's what Void Archives thought. However, Void Archives couldn't execute this alone. He desperately needed the specific abilities of the Herrscher of Reason. As confirmed in the Alien Space manga, Welt was still in possession of the core of reason. Using a mix of blackmail and subtle manipulation, the Archive managed to coerce Welt into cooperation. The plan required Welt to combine his Herrscher powers with the gravity manipulation of the Star of Eden to physically drag the sealed Honkai from the moon back to Earth. A suicidal feat that would almost certainly cost Welt his life due to the colossal strain. During an investigation into the anomalies at St. Fountain, May, Bronya, and their squad succeeded in thwarting Void Archives and neutralizing the Sky People's vanguard. Despite this victory, the enemy's mechanical advance force still managed to activate the Stargate directly on Earth's soil, triggering the start of a full-scale invasion. Although Void Archives was defeated during the conflict, Welt's whereabouts remained unknown. The immediate aftermath is still somewhat ambiguous, as the third chapter of a post-Honkai Odyssey has yet to be released, though it is generally assumed that humanity successfully repels the attack in this unseen chapter. However, we can piece together the subsequent events thanks to the Alien Space manga, along with details confirmed by Welt's character profile and dialogue in Honkai Star Rail. Void Archives had initially instigated the invasion himself, using a special beacon to guide the alien fleet to Earth. However, he eventually realized that the Sky People wouldn't stop at simply consuming the Honkai. They would annihilate humanity in the process. Resorting to blackmail once more, Void Archives forced Welt aboard a spaceship, and together they traversed the Stargate to hunt down and destroy the remainder of the hostile fleet. During this raid, they managed to breach the aliens' database, uncovering intelligence on Himeko of the Astral Express, alongside a list of other worlds targeted for future invasion. With their ship left drifting aimlessly and no way to return home, Welt resolved that as long as they were stranded, they would dedicate themselves to protecting these vulnerable worlds. In a twist of fate, it was Himeko herself who discovered their derelict vessel near the planet Salsato, bringing both Welt and the Archive aboard the Astral Express. Welt's profile emphasizes the sheer improbability of this encounter. They were rescued by the very woman whose existence they had only just discovered within the enemy's own data. The precise reason why the Sky People were targeting Himeko, and why she appeared in their database at all, remains one of the story's open mysteries. While the plot hasn't provided a concrete answer, we can construct a very plausible theory. Himeko possesses no personal connection to the Honkai, but she serves as the navigator of the Astral Express. The train holds detailed interstellar maps containing the coordinates of countless planets, systems, and civilizations. It stands to reason that the Sky People were hunting for this specific navigational library. Rather than relying on slow asteroid probes to gather intelligence, seizing the Express's star maps would allow them to instantly identify which worlds were vulnerable to harvest and which were best left undisturbed. Regarding the actual rescue of Welt and the Archive, the story has undergone a significant revision. In an early iteration of the manga, they were pulled from the wreckage by a group known as the Sugars and immediately returned to Earth. However, the finale of Alien Space appears to have been retconned to align with Welt's dialogue and character profile in Honkai Star Rail. Officially, the rescue is now attributed solely to Himeko. Attempting to accept both versions creates a narrative absurdity where Welt is lured out twice, traverses the Stargate twice, and destroys the alien fleet twice. To maintain a logical and unified timeline, only the version involving Himeko's intervention is considered canon today. We have established that Welt and the Archive entered the Stargate with one clear objective: to stop the Sky People. So, Where did the persistent rumor originate that Welt set out specifically to save Himeko? Unfortunately for those invested in that narrative, the idea that he embarked on this journey to rescue her is nothing more than a fan myth, unsupported by either the game or the manga. Saving Himeko? There is a prevalent fan theory suggesting that Welt is driven by guilt over the death of Murata Himeko from Earth. Himeko had lived a normal life, dreaming of a destiny among the stars, unaware that her father, the research engineer Murata Ryusuke, was working for Schicksal. Ryusuke died during a conflict with Welt after the radical scientist attempted to seize the powers of the Herrscher of reason, believing humanity's development had stalled. To protect the young girl from this harsh truth, Anti-Entropy forged a farewell letter, blaming the tragedy on a failed Honkai experiment. Years later, after discovering her father's documents, Himeko joined Schicksal to uncover the truth, a path that eventually ended in tragedy when she sacrificed herself to save Kiana Kazlana. However, when speaking with the archive, Welt frames Himeko's legacy in a different light, not one of guilt, but of inspiration. He acknowledges that even if good intentions once failed to yield the desired result, his belief in the power of humanity remains unshaken. He continues to act for the sake of others because he has always viewed kindness as humanity's most valuable asset, and a past tragedy will not shatter that conviction. Moreover, the claim that Welt abandoned Earth on a whim to save Himeko out of personal guilt effectively assassinates his character, painting this seasoned hero as a simple-minded egoist. First, Welt is a recognized authority and a veteran protector. Abandoning his homeland immediately after an alien invasion would be dereliction of duty. Second, he has an adopted son whose well-being is his priority. Third, such a motivation would imply an inability to accept the past, which directly contradicts his established character growth. So, where did this myth originate? It stems from a conflation of three elements: the manga's plot, subsequent retcons, and a flashy, but non-canonical, promotional video for Honkai Star Rail. In the manga, Welt does indeed find Himeko's file, reminisces about his former student, and resolves to help other worlds. But he never mentions a mission of personal redemption or an urgent rescue of Himeko herself. Later, lore clarifications revealed the irony of the situation. It wasn't Welt saving Himeko, but the Star Rail Himeko saving Welt and the Archive from their drifting ship. However, fan interpretations had already taken deep root. Fuel was added to the fire by the Reburn 2 concept trailer featuring the second divine key, which visually manifests as a train resembling the Astral Express. In canon, the second key cannot travel between worlds, and the events of that trailer are not part of the main timeline. Though, interestingly, it features a white-haired passenger that many view as an early prototype for March 7th. Ultimately, the Sky People plotline is unlikely to see further development. Welt's dialogue and the trajectory of the plot make it clear that the aliens have lost their momentum and no longer pose a credible threat. Even if they attempted to attack the Astral Express, they would likely be decimated. Himeko's crew commands impressive firepower and holds high standing among major galactic factions. For comparison, the Sky People's vanguard on Earth was halted by a weakened May, Bronya, and a squad of young cadets. Their tactics rely on scavenging weak targets and avoiding resistance. By contrast, the current stakes in Honkai Star Rail have escalated to a galactic level, focusing on the Lord Ravagers and the Emanators of Nanook's path of destruction. The narrative is marching toward the Eon War, a conflict that threatens the cosmological structure of the universe itself. Against forces of that magnitude, the Sky People are inconsequential. On the scale of the current conflict, there is simply no room left for them. Conclusion. To summarize the journey of how Welt arrived in Honkai Star Rail, it ultimately comes down to a mix of coercion and cosmic irony. Void Archives manipulated Welt onto a spaceship, forcing them both through the Sky People's portal to extinguish the alien threat at its source. As we have established, the Sky People are not a civilization that conquered the Honkai. They are a mechanical race, created by the sole surviving scientist of Venus, eventually commanded by a digitized human consciousness housed in a machine body. Deep within the enemy database, the Archive and Welt discovered a target list that included a file on Himeko. In a twist of fate, it was Himeko herself who eventually rescued them from the void, leading to their recruitment onto the Astral Express. Since then, Void Archives has disembarked to pursue his own independent path through the cosmos. His current whereabouts and ultimate objectives remain a mystery. Be sure to watch the previous video via the prompt on the screen. Thanks for watching.